This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Jake Yocom-Piat. Jake is a co-founder and project lead for the Decred cryptocurrency project, and Jake was on the podcast here at the Crypto Conversation last year. It was a very fun episode. I enjoyed talking to Jake then. I'm looking forward to talking to him today. Welcome back to the show, Jake.
Thanks for having me back, Andy.
All right, let's quickly touch base. So it's around the 11th of November where I am in New Zealand. I guess it's the day before where you are in the US. You know, a lot has happened since we last spoke. Just give us a quick update on yourself. Where are you based at the moment? How has the crazy year of 2020 treated you? And look, even now post-election, things are still pretty tense in America, right?
Oh, indeed. Yeah, things are definitely looking to get substantially more interesting over the coming few weeks here. So I'm in Chicago in Illinois in the US, and things have been pretty up and down here in terms of the project. Decred, we're focused on a store of value that has strong governance characteristics and promotes security, sustainability, and adaptability. And one of the nice parts about this is that from zero, we were always set up to work with everyone on remote. So that includes me, both with the contractors or the developers I work with at Company Zero, the company that I own, and then also with all the rest of the Decred contractors who've been working on the project for several years. So for the most part, while a lot of people are like, oh, my office is shut down, or oh, my business is shut down, really it's just business as usual for us. It's people are hacking in their houses or in small offices all over the planet, and that's just how we roll. So coronavirus really didn't slow us down very much. It was just sort of like, wow, now there's a mandate that we have to stay home, as opposed to people proactively staying home to write code or work on the Decred project.
Yes, indeed. And look, for anyone who is interested in Decred or wants to know more about Decred, I really do recommend that you listen to the first episode we did with Jake, because we talked a lot about the Decred origin story, how it relates to the myth of Satoshi Nakamoto, and Jake talks about why he thinks Satoshi is a team of three people, and there was just a lot of good stuff in that episode. Surveillance capitalism, how Jake thinks Decred can compete with Bitcoin. We might touch on some of this stuff today, but Jake is really here. I think he wants to talk about the new Decred Dex, so we will talk about that. But I guess just to set the scene first off, Jake, I think it would be good if you just kind of recap as to what Decred is and the kind of just touch on the high level features that differentiate Decred from most other crypto projects.
For sure, yeah. We focus, first and foremost on being a store of value, in the sense that, we're not a fiat currency. There's no single person in charge who can invalidate people's, deposits or funds. And that we're here to build something that adapts and evolves over time. So, the cryptocurrency is obviously a very powerful, technology, but it's not so great because it's actually very difficult to change things over time, and we aim to change the game in that respect, so that as changes are needed, we can deploy them in ways that other cryptocurrencies haven't to date, and for the most part can't do. There's a handful of them that can. And so the project is really about giving people a place where they can store their value and transact it in a way that's going to evolve over time and adapt, and also do it in a sustainable way, because financial systems currently are incredibly unstable. Most people in nation states, they only know their fiat currency, and central banks, especially in the context of coronavirus, have been very keen to print, and just endlessly issue more currency, as if that's going to solve our underlying financial and economic problems. So we're focusing on doing that within a constrained system where there's a finite issuance of coins. And we do that by putting the people who control the coins directly in charge. So that instead of, for example, the people who run the mining hardware for crypto, pure proof of work cryptocurrency, we put the proof of stakeholders, that is the people who hold the coins, in charge. So that system puts the sovereignty, in the hands of the people who really should have it, in my view. If you hold a lot of the currency, you have a lot of say. And so that's how our system works. In terms of things we've been doing recently, I believe last time I was on, we talked about privacy. We had done our initial deployment of our privacy tech, and that was in the fall of 2019. What we've done now is that we're working on getting that privacy, up to snuff and into a nice graphical wallet for everybody to use and make it, a more broadly used technology. But the other thing that we're working on, and we're going to be talking about more here, is the decentralized exchange, where the goal there is to bring these same principles that we've used in the context of time stamping with proof of work, decision making with proof of stake, and we're trying to bring that to the exchange process, where, for example, you might have Bitcoin and I have Decred, and you want Decred, I want Bitcoin, and we want to make an exchange. How can we do that in a way that is, stays true to the roots of the whole cryptocurrency movement, and also do it in a way that's secure? So we focus on doing this in a way that's non-custodial, so no one controls the coins, and then we focus on doing that without any KYC, so that if you and I want to exchange coins personally, there's no person in between who has to check our IDs and make sure Andy's not a bad guy and Jake's not a bad guy. It's all just it's disintermediated for the most part, and that's the direction we're trying to go with the decentralized exchange. In that a lot of other people are doing the decentralized exchange as a means to an end, and the means is to make money, right? You have an app coin, you want to charge a fee, you want to do that. Instead of doing that, we're taking the approach that we're trying not to rent seek. We're trying to do this so that we enable people to do these things in the same way that the Bitcoin network, the fees on the network aren't being charged, they aren't going to Satoshi Nakamoto's pocket. We're trying to set up a similar system for exchange.
Yes, indeed. And so we'll come back and we'll talk more about Decred, because I've always thought that Decred is one of the more interesting crypto projects for a variety of reasons. So, but let's talk about the Decred Dex then first, Jake. So you've given us a good I guess summary there. But if we rewind a little bit, why build the Decred Dex in the first place? What was the what's really the rationale here?
The motivator for us was, I saw a lot of this in 2017 and then in 2018. In 2017, during the big bull market, it became very clear to me that exchange listings were effectively a form of marketing, right? You get listed on Exchange A, Exchange B, Exchange C, and as that happens, that effectively markets your project. Lots of people see it. They're like, oh, wow, there's this new coin on this one exchange I use, and then they go buy it. And so it turned into marketing of a sort, and then exchanges began to basically demand listing fees. So at first it was kind of, just like, the everything's running hot and everybody wants to play this game. But then it quickly became, well, are you going to give me $50,000, $100,000, $1 million in, denominated in your currency, in your cryptocurrency to list you? And that really just never sat well with me, because as much as I understand everybody wants to make money, it really became very gatekeeper oriented in a way that I felt was very antithetical to the way cryptocurrency should work. It's like everyone's got these, permissionless stores of value, and they have all these great properties, and then it's like, and yeah, we're going to need to ID everyone, and then sit here and act like gatekeepers, on a project level in the space.
Yes, I guess that does make sense. And so from what I understand, as you guys roll out the Decred Dex, the first assets that will be tradable will be Decred, Bitcoin, and Litecoin. And then eventually you want to open that out to everyone. So there's a couple of things here, like some dexes are ERC20s only. So you guys seem to be looking a bit beyond that. Is that right?
Yeah, so what we focus on is cross-chain exchanges. We don't have an internal ecosystem like ERC20 in the context of Ethereum. So to us, I mean, and to me personally, I feel like the most valuable way to handle this is to make sure that there is price discovery on the trading pair of, DCR BTC, so that between Bitcoin and Decred. Bitcoin's the biggest, cryptocurrency, so it only makes sense to to have a trading pair with that. And then in the context of all these other projects, we went live with Decred, Litecoin, and Bitcoin. Litecoin, because it's so close to Bitcoin, we really didn't have to do very much extra to get it to work. And in terms of listing other projects, what we're trying to do is we're trying to basically turn the exchange process into an email-like user experience, right? Even though most people don't choose to operate their own email servers, the way it works is that, you or I could set up our own mail server, and then we can mail back and forth with each other. And then there's no Gmail that can read all of our mail. So we're trying to do the same sort of thing for the exchange process, and then the corresponding price discovery process that occurs, with that exchange process. So instead of it being like, oh, I have to send in a pile of, personally identifiable information to some third party, office, who knows where, in order to trade cryptocurrency, it becomes set up a server, get people that you want to trade with onto that server, and then go back and forth and trade it. And a part of that is that adding support for other coins is straightforward. Instead of it being a game, like a negotiation where you're trying to avoid paying large amounts of money in a listing fee to an exchange, it becomes, hey, let me have my developers work on this for a month or two, and then boom, you can then trade between your crypto asset, Bitcoin, Decred, Litecoin, and anybody else who gets added. So that's sort of the big idea. The big idea is to change the user experience around the exchange process.
Yeah, and look, I think that is something that obviously is very much needed, and we do see that happening. The user experience is certainly improving across the crypto ecosystem, and I guess Dex is where it needs the most attention. One of the things that is interesting about decentralized exchanges, Jake, is that, and this applies to Bitcoin or blockchain crypto in general, is people tend to throw around the word decentralized, and not everything is as decentralized as it could be, even in Bitcoin, which is probably arguably the most decentralized blockchain to date. But when it comes to DEXs, it's particularly interesting because, when you try and understand a DEX or a decentralized exchange, the big idea is that, there's no central third party in the middle, there's no intermediary, and no one can stop you from trading on that exchange. And that is good in theory, but it's in reality, there's a little bit more nuance there. Just to use two examples, the new Leverage DEX, I'm not sure if you're aware of that. That's a new decentralized futures exchange. It looks pretty slick, but they do not allow users from the US and the UK. And then also Uniswap, which I guess is kind of seen as it is the biggest decentralized exchange in the kind of Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. But even, they don't like to talk about it, but, they tried to stop users from a whole lot of countries, your Irans and all those countries that America doesn't like, from using the Uniswap front end. Of course, there are clever ways around that, and I think when that happened, some developers just set up new front ends on IPFS. But I guess what I'm getting at, Jake, is Uniswap presumably did that because a lot of their team is in the US and they didn't want to attract attention from the authorities. So, where does the Decred Dex sort of sit in this spectrum?
I think what it really comes down to is it all comes down to everyone has to make their own decisions. We go out of our way to make a point to try to comply with the organizations like OFAC, so that we're not running afoul of any local governments. But it's not really possible to stop things like this in the same way that you can't prevent, say, Iranians from using Bitcoin and sending Bitcoin and receiving Bitcoin. you can't stop that. But the what is it? The tip of the point, the tip of the spear in terms of enforcement is typically centralized exchanges. They already control identity information. They already handle custody of assets, and they make a natural point for controlling flows of capital like that. In the context of DEXs, I mean, there's only so much you can really do. I mean, just like you pointed out with the Uniswap folks, is that you can stop the front end from being accessed from somewhere else, but it's like, unless you start blocking Tor connections and blocking all the VPN services, it's prohibitively difficult to prevent people from sort of blacklisted nations from using such technology, in the same way that it's very difficult to do the same for any cryptocurrency. So on that front, we don't really we don't go a whole lot further than anybody else. But another thing that that we have working for us is there's no custody involved. So at no point does the DEX take custody of any of the assets involved. It's all the custody remains only with the two endpoints. So if you and I are trading, only we have custody. And then so there's no rules in terms of the KYC stuff that apply in that context, but there's always the specter of regulation, and you're always going to have to deal with it. And I don't see it as a massive risk. I think things like Uniswap actually have a lot more risk in that context.
Very interesting. Okay, well, talk to me, Jake, about what sort of early volume are you seeing on the Decred Dex? And I understand it's very early in the piece, but how do you plan to I guess grow the exchange and attract new users? There are new DEXs popping up left, right, and center at the moment, and of course people now have multiple ways to buy crypto assets if they want to. What's the I guess the go-to-market strategy, if you want to put it in corporate terms? How do you attract users and grow this thing over time?
Well, so one thing that we have going for the project is that we pay all of our contractors directly in Decred. So that's sort of the beginning of how our internal ecosystem works. That is, people perform useful work for the project, they build a project, and they get paid in Decred once a month. And that process means that there's 50 or 60 different people or corporate entities every month that have Decred, and some of them want to get out, convert some of that to Bitcoin and sell it. So what we effectively have been dog fooding, to make use of that wonderful term, the DEX, in the sense that it's being used internally by some project contractors. And we've seen a lot of uptake amongst our more technical users, many of whom are, as I pointed out, also contractors. In terms of volume, we've seen about 150 Bitcoins worth of volume flow through the exchange in the past. What is it? It's been like 2.5 weeks since launch. So there's a decent amount of volume. It's not like knock your socks off, but considering that the thing just launched under a month ago, I think it's doing perfectly fine. And it seems like there's a slow uptick in the volume in terms of people who are making the markets and people who are placing taker orders. So we're experiencing slow organic growth. And then from a user interface perspective, is we have running the user interface. The user interface is itself graphical, but you have to do a little bit of system administration stuff to get it up and running. So because it doesn't have an incredibly boom, you open a website kind of front end to it, that has led to more technical people using it. So considering the limited audience that it has right now and the short time since launch, I think it's actually doing better than I had expected. I didn't expect it to see quite as much volume as in the past few weeks.
Okay, sure. And so look, Jake, in 2020, one of the many narratives. So obviously we've had the pandemic, we've had the US election. Those are probably two of the big narratives of the year. But here in crypto, we've certainly seen a massive boom in DeFi, particularly in, I guess, the middle of the year, and so part of that has obviously been the rise of DEXs like Uniswap, and look, there's a whole bunch of others. So yeah, interested in your thoughts on just, I guess, the wider trends here and what could happen in the next, I don't know, next 12 months, 24 months, or even 5 years, in terms of how would you see the landscape shifting in terms of, you know, the centralized exchanges and DEXs, and what's going to happen? I know this is kind of crystal ball stuff, but interested in your thoughts.
No, I've got plenty to say on this topic. So the first thing I'll say is that, you know, the rise of Uniswap and the sort of the automated market making protocols that have spun off of it, I think that it's going to be sort of a you know, people are making a mountain out of a molehill about it. There's no doubt that there's a lot of liquidity on there, but what it seems to be generating is liquidity for liquidity's sake, and not liquidity, you know, to support, you know, work of substance. So if you're doing work of substance and then the liquidity shows up, that's great. But there's also a lot of junk where it's basically, you know, the automated market makers effectively allow people to create a Potemkin village, right? You know, normally you'd create some new ERC20 token and no one would care. But with AMMs, you can basically create that junk token. Then a few people show up with a bunch of coins and spin up a bunch of liquidity, and then it's like, wow, look at this thriving village. So, you know, there's so much liquidity here, and then value, and then you know, questionable things have been happening with that. So I think that that's going to burn out in the longer run. Not to mention the fact that I feel like, and this might go over the heads of some listeners, but this might really resonate with some people, is that automated market making smart contracts are necessarily deterministic. So if you tell me, hey, this is how I'm going to make the market, a sufficiently intelligent person can write a bot to basically strip the money out of that market as a function of knowing what the market making is going to do beforehand. And then similarly, there's all kinds of ways to manipulate it, because once you have that stuff on chain, then miners can play all kinds of games about ordering transactions and who gets to settle first and who doesn't. So there's all kinds of issues with that, but I do think it's, you know, it's going to continue to have some action for a while. I think it's extremely interesting, but I think it's ultimately sort of a dead end. In terms of where things are going with sexes, centralized exchanges. Centralized exchanges are really becoming banks. You know, they've always been regarded very close to banks. They're money transmitters in the U.S., and I believe they're regulated similarly in a lot of other developed nations. So they have to, you know, it's basically turning into a bank. That is, that it's just a bank that offers, you know, cryptocurrency liquidity. So that's the direction I think that's going to go, is that they're going to continue down the bank path where lots of liquidity, credit gets issued to them. They use that credit. The ones who use the credit better than the others will grow. The ones who can't get enough credit and can't use it smartly enough will fall by the wayside. I think we're going to see a lot more centralization in the context of centralized exchanges just by merit of those factors. Because as soon as you're issuing, you know, large amounts of credit to people, that has a highly centralizing property. I guess another thing you had mentioned before was these leverage dexes, right, where people can get credit and trade, you know, futures or speculate. The issue I see with that's going to come up is anytime you start issuing credit, you have to be very careful, right? With most cryptocurrencies, credit is issued only for people who do useful stuff like proof of work or proof of stake or proof of something you can prove. And then when it comes to, futures, it's like, as soon as you start offering leverage, you're offering credit. If you're offering credit, that credit has to come from somewhere. So it begs the question how that credit was issued. So I think that, you know, leverage in the context of cryptocurrency is going to continue to be a bit of a hot potato where everybody plays games with it until it sort of explodes in their face. So that's sort of the direction I see things going. That is, that as much as people love the leverage, it comes with a model that is sort of antithetical to cryptocurrency, which is issuing potentially arbitrarily large amounts of credit to people, and then that is necessarily a subjective process. And if you try to make it a not subjective process, you're going to get gamed. So it's a very messy future I see for exchanges. And the reason that I really chose to go the direction I did with the DEX as opposed to just use one of these other existing DEXs is that pretty much every other DEX out there is an attempt to rent seek. The rent seeking comes down to, you know, if you look at every DEX, it's either a centralized corporation, it is a blockchain, a standalone chain with its own coin, or it's a token. So these groups of things are all about, basically living off of fees and fee income. And instead of doing that, what we decided to do is go, listen, the centralizing, influence in the context of exchange is really the fees. The reason people, there are only a few big stock exchanges is because there's a lot of incentive because people want to capture the fees. So if we made a point to not capture any of the fees, we could potentially have something that's more like a mesh network, sort of like Bitcoin or Decred, upon which we can all, place and match and settle our trades, as opposed to going, oh, if somebody's collecting a fee, there's always going to be like a battle and everyone's trying to like fight to get more fees. So the most powerful thing you can do is say, screw the fees. We can't do the fees. If we're going to do the fees, then it's going to get centralized. So that's sort of our way of cutting a middle path here, which is, by collecting no fees, we can actually build infrastructure that everyone can use and, get the efficiency out of it without, sort of baking in centralization.
Sure. You, a couple of things you mentioned there. When you talk about the futures exchanges and, the kind of the leverage that is on tap essentially, and that's got to come from somewhere. It also reminded me of this idea of rehypothecation, right, which is very common in across Wall Street and in the traditional financial ecosystem, and increasingly so in some areas of the crypto ecosystem, particularly with the lending services, right? So I'm not sure if you saw the news this week that the lending service Cred, they filed for bankruptcy protection, and you've also got the really big services like BlockFi and Celsius. What's your take on those kind of services which allow users to effectively deposit their crypto assets? It's sort of like an exchange, and even more like a traditional banking service, because you can obviously get loans by using your crypto as collateral, but of course it's not your keys, not your coins situation. What do you think of those services?
I think that I understand people's desire to emulate the credit issuance process from fiat currencies. It's a very, there's a huge draw to do this, because it's like, if you ask, who controls the world around us, I think it's pretty fair to state that it's banks, and, and the credit they issue really have an enormous outsized influence on the world around us currently. Maybe in the future they won't, but right now they do. And so people see that and they want to emulate that and put that into cryptocurrency. But I mean, just like I was saying earlier, is that's the challenge, right? Is if you look at credit in the credit in the context of cryptocurrencies, is that the most powerful credit out there is the stuff, it's the tokens and coins that come out of proof of work and proof of stake and other sort of cryptographically provable protocols where you do X and then you receive something for doing X, as opposed to you do X and then somebody gives you 100X because, well, you're at the casino and they want you to gamble. So I feel like this overall pattern of credit issuance is going to continue. We're going to see a lot more people attempting to get this right, but I think that it's a real challenge, because just like I said, it cuts against the nature of the cryptocurrency space, which is that it's a bearer asset. It's a bearer asset revolution, not it's not a paper money printed out of thin air revolution. So what they're trying, what I kind of see is that with credit, in the way that we use it currently with fiat, it's trying to bring the, money printer go burr into the cryptocurrency context. And I totally get it. And I see there's going to be a lot of people chasing this for the foreseeable future, but I don't see a very good way for it to fit in without it being destructive and unstable in the same ways as, fiat currencies. Just like you pointed out, if you start lending in cryptocurrencies and you're not careful, you're very quickly going to lose your shirt. And, if you try to automate that process, the same thing's going to happen. So while everything's, say the market's going up or the valuation of some coin that backs, these loans goes up, everything's great. But then as soon as things start to tip downwards, that's when things get very nasty. And I think that has a similar problem as the automated market maker protocols, which is that as soon as you start doing automated market making, it's all great on the way up. But then as soon as the liquidity starts to fall off, then that begets a price drop, then that begets more liquidity falling off. And it's the same sort of pattern as, as these credit bubbles. you spin up a credit bubble. It's all great on the way up, and then at some point, everybody's like, "Oh man, I don't know if that's worth what you want me to pay." And then it becomes, a collapsed psychological state, and the thing goes back to zero or close. So that's sort of where I see that going.
Sure, and I think the easiest way to understand what you're talking about there is expressed best by Warren Buffett, actually, and when he said, "When the tide goes out, it's easy to see who's been swimming naked," right?
For sure.
All right, well, let's go to a very quick break, Jake, and then we'll come back and we'll just finish off quickly with some closing thoughts on Decred. We'll be back in 1 second.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Jake from Decred. Normally, we'd finish off with the crypto conversation hot take round, but I've done that before with Jake. So let's just use the time that we've got, Jake, to kind of touch base on where Decred is at, and maybe just to start off with, what's your actual role? What do you do day to day? What's your day to day look like in terms of Decred?
Oh, my day-to-day responsibilities are effectively, I think it would be fair to say that it's sort of like an academic or a developer job, where it's like I'm a project manager. I kind of herd cats. I let the cats do what they want to do most of the time. Then every once in a while there's a release. And then what I do is that, I make sure everybody's sort of working on what they're supposed to be working on, or if something's really far behind, I try to get more people working on that. And then in terms of projects, there's individual projects, like, for example, DCR Dex that really matter to me. And so I really aggressively pursue those projects, and I work with a developer team, and then I go back and forth with them. I, remind them of, oh, this part's missing, that part needs to change, this one isn't working right. And so I do that, day in, day out. And what I've really been doing is I've been focusing on markets lately. And, anyone who's been following the project saw that, in terms of, market cap ranking, we took a dump recently. And, as a result, it's high time that we really kind of fixed our markets. To date, we launched in February 2016. We really hadn't put any attention on the markets. We'd just sort of, done whatever we did. And as a function of that, it's like, I think we've done organically really, really well. Until even a year ago, we had never even had a market maker for the project. So, we've really come a very long way in the context of our markets in just the past, 6 to 12 months. And so that's what I've been focusing on a lot lately. So I'm working on the Dex, I'm working on the Dex client. I'm making sure that, that orders don't get wedged, that settlement is smooth, that the fees are right. These are the kind of things I do on a day-to-day basis. And it's kind of a slow process where it's, I might work with 1 or 2 people, 1, 2, 3 days in a row. And then I work with another couple people another day. And I just keep rotating like that. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. And this year, I think, Jake, it's been difficult for some projects because the air in the room, or the noise in the room, the publicity, or the narrative, the conversation, whatever you like to call it, has really been focused on Ethereum and DeFi. So it's been difficult for other projects maybe to get traction or attention when all that is happening. And so I remember last time you were on, we spoke about how, I've always thought that even like hardcore Bitcoin maximalists, who don't have a lot of time probably for DeFi and that kind of business, but they've always had a soft spot for certainly Monero, XMR, and probably Decred as well. Kind of seeing Monero and Decred as, kind of core proof of work, proper cryptocurrencies who do it the cypherpunk way, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, but if you look at the the Decred asset price against Bitcoin, it has had a long year. And another example I can give on kind of this is I saw an interesting tweet exchange through by Crypto Messiah and Coin Artist. So these are obviously their pseudonyms, but these are two people who used to look after the marketing of Decred, and they ran the community, I think, back in 2017, which is obviously a very different time, and it's hard to compare the craziness of 2017 to now. But I think you get my point, Jake. So I guess what I'm saying is, where do you see Decred fitting in the cycle at the moment, and how do you kind of roar back into life and try and capture that attention and tell the Decred story, which is a strong story?
Well, what we've been focusing on is like I said, I've been focusing on markets at least for 6 to 12 months, probably more like 18 months, really. And it's finally starting to bear fruit. After the release of the Dex, we recently had a little mini bull run. Things seem to be shaping up nicely, which is a pleasant change of pace relative to the past several months. And it's funny that you mentioned Crypto Messiah and Coin Artist. So they worked with the project back in early 2017. They showed up, and the two of them are very good at gaining people's attention and getting attention on social media. So that was really their role in the context of the project, is they showed up and they hyped the project, and it worked out very nicely, not just because they were good at what they were doing, but because, Decred is actually backed by actual technology and, and substantive development work that's ongoing and consistent.
Yes.
Whereas there's lots of projects that were just about raising money and, pissing the money away on random stuff and then,
100%.
going bust. So it's like, so they showed up, they were at the right place at the right time. So they could have pumped other projects up, which I believe they did, and didn't go as well. But then they showed up, and their hype and then our development output really worked well. And so that gelled in 2017. And if I recall correctly, Crypto Messiah was very keen on taking tons of credit for the pump. But it's, it takes a village. It is not,
Absolutely.
It's not a one-man show. I might be the person that people hear or talk to, but I'm just a fraction of what goes on in Decred. I'm just the guy who talks on interviews and manages projects. But there's tons of people in the trenches firing bullets and digging more trenches, and that's and that's sort of the game we have to play, which is that everybody's good at something.
Yeah, and look, one of the other things that I do like about Decred is the Politea proposal system that you guys run and the treasury. And the fascinating thing about this is because it means that you guys are more transparent than so many projects, and the whole ethos of blockchain is you should be transparent. And so for people that don't know what Politea is, well, you can describe it better than me, but what I like about it, Jake, is that you can kind of go and look at all these proposals that people have proposed, and then the Decred community argue back and forth. And when I say argue, they don't argue, sometimes they do, but they put forward really well-reasoned arguments for or against, and it's just messy human community governance in action. But it's fascinating to look at. So yeah, what's your anything you want to say there? Go for it.
I mean, Politea has been going really well. Things have finally progressed to the point where we have a coming release, and then shortly after that release, I'm going to put out a core development proposal. I admit I've been incredibly lazy and not gotten it done sooner, but there's lots of things being proposed on a regular basis every week, or sometimes few weeks if it's if no one's posting. There are proposals. People have discussions. So currently there's a couple development proposals up from the Rada group. They're one of the corporate contractors who work with us. And, there was a translation proposal recently. There's, more and more, all of the project expenditures are moving on to Politea. And my hope is that by the end of 2020 here, we're going to have literally all of the project expenditures on, basically billing against approved proposals. And the proposal process is indeed messy, but the way I see it is that I'll take our proposal process and our voting process on Politea, which is off chain, and our voting process, which is on chain, over any nation state voting process anytime. Things. I mean, and especially in the context of the way things have gotten here in the U.S., it's like voting should not be custodial, and Politea is just a manifestation of that. So it's like we all argue, everybody has a different opinion. Nobody's 100% right. Everybody just has different views and different claims. So rather than try to sort of create a moral, start voting on people who we're electing, we vote on policies, and things stay pretty civil. At worst it's like, I think your policy sucks, or your policy's too expensive, or there's no way you can deliver that policy, or things along those lines, as opposed to like, I hate your face, or I don't like the way you wear your hair, or you're an idiot. We stay out of that most of the time, and we do that by sticking to policies. So it's been a great tool, and I've really been enjoying it.
Yeah, and look, we've obviously seen with US politics this year has never been more divisive, and social media certainly plays a large role in that. So, well, here's a question for you, Jake. How do we solve the messy problem of democratic elections? Does blockchain have I know there's a lot of proponents for blockchain voting, but I understand there's also technical problems to solve there as well. But what's your take on how we solve voting and get it right?
I mean, my take is really that we do take the Decred approach that I was just talking about, which is instead, the most divisive thing about politics always comes down to personality. Yeah. It's always arguing like, oh, so-and-so is a bad person because of X. They're a good person because of Y. It's just all this endless sort of, what is it? There's that triangle. It's like the pyramid of argument, right? So it's like, everything is about like attacking the person and not the policy. And so I think that the way forward really is to decouple policies from people. That is, rather than electing someone every 4 years, which I feel like is an artifact of the fact that, let's say 200 or 300 years ago, it was practical. You had to have so-and-so running this and that for N years because, hey, you can't it's a pain to get everybody to vote. It's like, it's difficult, but with how interconnected everything is, currently, these sorts of arguments don't really make sense. There's no good reason why, say you and I couldn't vote together on like some sort of, Five Eyes budget to do X, Y, or Z, as opposed to this situation where it's like, well, I get to vote for a personality, and that personality will pretty much do whatever they want after they get my vote. And so that, I think, really needs to go out the window, because it's very hard to judge people and personalities, but it's very easy to judge projects and deliverables and output. And so like that's why we take that approach with Decred, which is, the game is not for me to be elected project lead forever. The point is for me to get to the point where there is no project lead. I'm just a project lead. I'm a project manager with the Decred project, as opposed to I'm the guy who runs things. So instead of this focus on centralization, which always comes down to personality, we got to step back and go, this is really about policy. This is about getting stuff done and being constructive, as opposed to, just being on the dole and living off of entitlements, which is a massive, massive problem here in Chicago and Illinois. Basically our state and our city are effectively bankrupt because the people who are supposed to be responsible with money use that responsibility to go, well, you know what? I'd really like a nicer pension. So if you guys ever want to, reform pensions, not going to happen. So you got to stay away from these conflicts of interest and entitlements. And, I think that is really the route forward. And it's going to take nation state governments a while to catch on, if they ever catch on.
Yes, it will. Okay, well, just before we start to finish off, Jake, I'd like to actually just get your current thoughts on where you see Bitcoin, because I know you were around in the very early days of Bitcoin, so you've probably got a better perspective than most, even if it is biased towards Decred, but that's okay. But obviously, Bitcoin continues to march forward, and this year, that's one of the other narratives we're starting to see. Finally, we've been waiting for this kind of institutional adoption or inflow, and that is starting to happen. And I think, Bitcoin's really turning the corner in terms of becoming, a recognized hedge or investment or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, take a step back and just where do you see Bitcoin at the moment? Any problems or what? How are we looking?
Oh, Bitcoin evolves slowly. That's not news. It evolves, typically by soft fork, and so there's certain changes that are very difficult to implement as a soft fork or impossible. So that kind of it's a constrained evolution that it undergoes. But what I see is I see more and more, people and smart money and investors recognizing that Bitcoin and its proof of work network, particularly because it's the first and has the most network effects, is really, it makes a better global reserve asset than pretty much anything else out there. It's better than gold. You can't cross a border with 100 kilograms of gold. You're going to get in all kinds of trouble crossing borders with that. Somebody's going to confiscate it. You can cross borders with as much Bitcoin as you want. You got some stuff, you got a key written down on paper and then maybe a passphrase, you're good to go. And so as a global reserve asset, it really is as good as it gets. And what people are seeing is that by buying it, they insulate themselves from, what's really happened as a result of this C-19 stuff is coronavirus has caused central banks to issue credit like mad. And so, fiat currency inflation is really getting out of control. And people are more and more going, wow, they just keep issuing credit. Maybe I should get something that's portable and is better than, gold. And Bitcoin is the first thing they see. So that's really reassuring because that's an entry point for Decred and everybody else. And I think that, to connect this back to the DCR Dex stuff I was talking about earlier is that we're trying to use Bitcoin in a way that aligns with what I'm saying right here, which is that instead of trying to stabilize, the value of Decred against the US dollar, this like incredibly inflationary fiat currency, we're trying to stabilize it against what we see as the future the future of global reserve assets. So it's sort of like digital gold, and we're using that to stabilize the value of Decred, as opposed to going on centralized exchanges and having everything be custodial, and then just anyone can play all kinds of games and screw with the price of your asset. So the future I'm seeing is really that Bitcoin is going to continue to gain dominance because it is the entry point for people who have become aware of cryptocurrency and its benefits.
Fantastically said. I very much agree, Jake. All right, well, let's finish this off. Take us out, hand the microphone back to you, and just give your closing thoughts on the DCR Dex or whatever you want to say. Why should people use the DCR Dex? And we'll put the link in the show notes, but it's dex.decred.org if you just want to go there now and have a look. Take it away, Jake.
Yeah, it basically does what we can to make the exchange process permissionless and similar to email. You can show up, you can have some Bitcoin, you can have some Decred, you can trade them back and forth. You can, let's say, you run your own cryptocurrency project. You can get your project added and then operate your own server and then effectively make your own market. You don't need to ask me for permission. You don't need to ask anyone for permission to do that. So the code's out there. People can get their hands on it and run the ball themselves. The game here is to remove the barriers to entry like KYC, to make it more frictionless to exchange things, and to make the price discovery process a more organic thing. The price discovery should be about people freely exchanging ideas and not about people basically in a room filled with surveillance cameras transacting. That to me is not the future of price discovery. The price discovery process needs to be decentralized to beat that term to death, and the only real way to do that is to keep custody with only the people who are exchanging and not with any intermediaries. Further, there really should be nobody collecting these fees because the fees act as a centralization. It creates centralization pressure on whoever's collecting the fees. So to create the future, we've got to stabilize it and have like train tracks between all the important things. And my view is that DCR Dex is one of those things, and we're doing it in a way that isn't we're not out to seek rent. We're out to build the future and to do it not just ourselves and with Bitcoin, but with other cryptocurrency projects. And so anyone who's interested, yeah, you're welcome to show up, hit us up on chat, and, stop by the website, have a look.
Very nicely said. Thank you very much, Jake. Always a pleasure. Keep in touch. Look forward to doing it again in another year or so, and be fascinating to see how Decred continues to play out in the meantime. All the best. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.